Greetings and welcome to Amateur Hour, where we examine amateur level gameplay with the goal of making you a better player. Today, we'll be looking at a match from the Amateur Divergent Gaming Tournament featuring Gale Force Esports and THC on Cursed Hollow. As we join in this game, you can see that Gale Force Esports and THC are currently tied. They're both at level 9, they both have 1 tribute. But Gale Force has a slight advantage over THC in the sense that they have an experience advantage over them. Now, it isn't that huge, but it's enough to guarantee them their level 10 ults before THC will get them. Now, in a lot of cases in Hero League, if you're playing, it's right now that your team will say, screw it, we've got to go for the objective. But that is the wrong call. If you see what THC is doing right now, you can kind of see their strategy. Rather than going in for this objective, which by the time they get there, Gale Force Esports is almost certainly going to have ults, they're choosing to stay back and soak experience in each individual lane. It sucks to have to give up a tribute or any other objective, but sometimes you have to realize that it's just not worth it. When the odds are stacked against you, and the result of the fight doesn't mean that you're going to lose the game, or it's something that's going to seriously hurt you, or maybe lead to you losing the game, you have to seriously consider maybe not going for that objective. And that's exactly what THC is doing here. Instead of going here and probably dying, and getting themselves even further behind, they're going to just sit back, let Gale Force take the objective, soak lanes, and then take them on when they get level 10. Now, just because you're giving up an objective does not mean that you don't have to threaten a tiny bit. You can see Muradin coming in here for some harass. Now, obviously, Muradin is not about to start a team fight. He's not committed to this, he's just going in to poke his head in there to delay it a little bit. That's all he's trying to do. And it's really important that you understand that, and you don't try and repeat that, and you don't try and dive in there and stop something when there's really nothing for you to stop. It's okay to poke, but don't commit. Now you can see THC just got their level 10s, and they're immediately going to try and take advantage of them. Kalthus and Raynor can feel the enemy team coming down on them. They are going to get caught by ETC's Power Slide and Dance. At the same time, Sylvanas' arrow is going to land and do a pretty heavy amount of burst on the two of them. Uther's going to save Raynor with his ult here. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to do the same to Kalthus as Malfurion roots him, which you can see just barely. Now that little bit of extra snare is going to allow Falstad to come down here and do the final bit of burst to finish off Kalthus. Now while Raynor's ult has been popped for a while now, it's mainly not to kill anyone, just to zone them out. And the red team, THC, is going to easily be able to get away here. Once again, this whole series of events is simply because THC decided, instead of going for that tribute, to soak instead, which highlights just how important experience and talent tiers are in Heroes of the Storm. Now because this is a 4-on-2, as Leoric has chosen to go into the mid lane, and Tyrael and Muradin are too busy tangoing up north, this means that the red team is going to be handed this fort on a platter. Now this is actually a massive loss for Gale Force. That's not just because they're losing a structure, it's also because this means that anytime this boss is taken, or anytime that it's threatened by THC, they're gonna have to defend it hard, as a boss will immediately threaten keep, which is a huge deal, especially this early in the game. As a new tribute spawns, you're going to see both teams move to fight for this tribute, as this one is super important, as it could potentially curse THC. Yet THC's response to this tribute and their rotation is perfect. They spot Kalthus down south, killing a wave of their minions, meaning they know at worst this is going to be a 5v4. They quickly jump on Leoric and dispatch him as Falstad starts capturing the tribute. Now if you look down, you'll see Malfurion drop roots in that bush, at the same time Muradin was pounding away at this Uther. The whole point of that was essentially making it so that if Raynor wanted to come and attack Falstad and interrupt that tribute, he would have to make himself really wide open. He'd be the only person essentially there and be an easy target. Now, right here is when I think most teams would overstay their welcome and consider going for the fort, but you're going to watch as THC backs up. As soon as Leoric spawns, you're going to see them go for ETC, but they're not going to get much on him as Leoric's going to get instantly stunned, and then Sylvanas' silencing arrow is going to completely lock everyone else down. Now while this does leave Falstad to the south, he's going to easily get away. I think Gale Force Esports expected THC to just back off here, but they're going to actually spot Tyrael by himself and dive on him. Now while he is going to look like he's going to just barely make it away, Leoric's going to jump in to try and ensure his escape. Unfortunately for him, ETC is going to power slide over him and not come back into the rest of the red team, and he's going to be annihilated again. This is going to give them level 13 and a talent tier advantage over Gale Force Esports. Unfortunately, it's not going to last that long, as if you look on the minimap, Kael'thas is simply going to go a little south of the tribute and clean up a wave, which is going to give them 13. If you look on the minimap, you can see that the blue team right now is taking one of their camps. The whole idea here is they know they have time before this tribute spawns and before it threatens them, and they think by taking this camp, they'll be able to put some pressure on middle lane that the red team will either have to respond to or essentially just let happen. Now I'm going to pause this because there's a lot to talk about right here, a lot of things I want to point out to you. The first thing I want to point out is Kael'thas. Now he's kind of gotten caught down here, but I don't think his positioning is that bad. It's going to allow him to do two things. First off, he is completely separated from the rest of his team. That's usually a bad thing, but here it's a good thing as the enemy team, THC, has ETC. Likewise, the rest of his team is kind of stuck in this corridor, which, if you play ETC, is basically the juiciest thing possible. This means that you know a dance is coming. Kael'thas knows this definitely, and by staying far away, he is giving himself the ability to end that dance instantly. Now, while that's not necessarily what's going to happen when the fight actually starts going, I think that was his strategy coming into this engagement. Outside of Kael'thas, I want you to look at Falstad, and I want you to pay attention to how far along in this tribute cast he is. He's about 50% of the way through casting it. Now pay attention when this unpauses, where all the damage is going, where his teammates go, all of that. Because I think one tiny mistake on his part is what ends up costing THC this entire fight and arguably cost them the game. Finally, I think Leoric is in a bad position here. I think he needs to be where Uther is right now, and I think Uther needs to be a little further back. With that said, Uther's going to take advantage of his aggressive positioning and use a Holy Radiance and try and interrupt Falstad. Unfortunately, it's not going to hit him, but fortunately for the blue team, Falstad's going to move anyway, despite the fact that he was 90% done the cast. That half second of time is going to allow the blue team to get much better positioning here on THC. Now the blue team knows what's coming. ETC can't help himself, and he turns to Power Slide and Dance. But as the Power Slide finishes, Uther stuns him and interrupts the dance, completely removing his ult for 8 seconds. As much of a disaster as that is, they still have a fighting chance here. That's quickly erased as Raynor pops his ult, Gale pops his ult, and Tyrael pops his. This creates just a storm of damage and invulnerability that the red team can't do anything about. Making matters worse, Malfurion popped his ult just too late here, and he can't do much to heal ETC or Muradin, who are the two people on his team that need it the most. While he does get a regrowth onto ETC, it's just too little too late, as the blue team has them on the ropes. In retreat, they've gone in all kinds of different directions, which is actually making this fight incredibly difficult for them, as there's no way for them to simply collapse on one target. At this point, they just need to get out of there. Gale Force is going to cut north and threaten Falstad here. Uther's going to land a stun on him, but it's not going to be enough as he barrel rolls and gusts them away. Now, while THC is going to try and kind of poke them a little bit, they don't really have enough health to seriously engage, and so they're going to back off. There's no way that THC is going to stop this. Gale Force is going to take the tribute, and THC is going to be cursed. While THC is going to move up here to try and clean up this wave, Gale Force at the bottom is going to threaten this fort. As they collapse on it, they're going to be able to quickly drop it down. Now THC isn't really sure what to do. While you can see them starting to converge, you can see Malfurion is staying behind to clean this minion wave up, but he's actually not going to stay to clean up the entire wave, and he's going to head down here, figuring that his team wants to fight. Gale Force is going to spot Falstad and chase after him a little bit. This is going to allow the rest of THC to sneak behind them and engage them in a good fight. Uther stuns ETC to start, and they try and get some damage on him, but he's easily able to power slide and get a dance on the most critical members of Gale Force. While Sylvanas does land a good arrow, it's not enough as Tyrael is able to pop Sanctification, which completely turns the fight around. It looks like THC is going to be able to stay in it though, as they manage to kill Kael'thas and Raynor and turn it into a 3v3. The members of Gale Force know, however, that Sylvanas has already used Haunting Wave, so they quickly turn and kill her as she has no escape. This turns things into a 3v2, or more accurately, a 3v1, as ETC has decided he's not nearly as metal as he thought he was. While Muradin is going to do his best to escape here, after a quick jaunt in the woods, blue team is going to annihilate his life. This is going to put Gale Force Esports into a pretty great position, as they are a tiny bit of experience away from 16. Likewise, by destroying the fort at the bottom, they've opened up that lane to be threatened by a boss, meaning that the next boss is going to threaten the keep before the core, meaning it's much more dangerous for THC to allow them to take that boss, which is exactly what they're doing right now. Now, while THC is going to take their own boss in response, it's not going to do nearly as much damage as their boss is going to be threatening just the outermost keep, while the enemy's boss, Gale Force Esports boss, is going to be threatening the keep that protects core. While we will not be watching the rest of this game, from this point on, Gale Force Esports holds their lead and eventually wins the game. Now that we've taken this game apart mechanically, I'd like to give you some tips that you can take home to become a better player with. The first takeaway here is that often when people play Heroes of the Storm, they get mistaken into thinking that levels are the thing that matters. Levels don't matter. What matters is talent tiers. Fighting someone that's 10 when you're 11 or 11 when 10 isn't really going to feel that much different. But fighting someone between 9 and 10, or between 12 and 13, or 15 and 16, those are huge differences. And often, those are the differences that make you either a winner or a loser. In Heroes of the Storm, you should never engage in a fight unless you're on the same talent tier as your enemy. Likewise, if you're above a talent tier, you should be looking for the fight because you have a huge advantage and the enemy team can't fight you on even ground. The second takeaway is that IGN was wrong. Anyone that says Heroes of the Storm is a game that just is about snowballing, and once you get ahead, you stay ahead, and once you're behind, you stay behind, is completely wrong. To the contrary, Heroes of the Storm is a game where anything can happen, and a single misplay can change the fate of the entire game. It doesn't matter if you are at a high-level MMR, a low-level MMR, if you're a professional player, an amateur player, at any point in Heroes of the Storm, the tide can turn. In this game, we saw it happen twice. At first, THC was behind, but they managed to take the advantage and get in front of Gale Force. But then Gale Force, with one team fight, was able to just topple THC, and they ended up winning the game. To be blunt, I'm talking directly to you, the person who at level 4 declares GG because one person died on your team. Heroes of the Storm is a game that you can come back from almost anything in. All it takes is a little bit of patience and a little bit of teamwork. That's it for this episode of Amateur Hour. If you learned something from this episode, please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Likewise, if you had any comments about this new series, once again, please let me know. Also, if you'd like your demo to be featured on Amateur Hour, send it to the email in the description. And finally, a big thank you to Dreadnought and Zoya for casting this tournament. If you want to watch this game with their casting, I provided a link in the comments.